The story happens in Gotham City, 1981. Arthur Speck, Joaquin Phoenix, fills in as a jokester for recruit for an organization called Haas. He battles with extreme sorrow by and by, however discovers some type of confidence in performing for other people and attempting to make individuals giggle. He is entrusted with publicizing a store by moving and waving a sign around. On one such event, the sign gets grabbed by a gathering of troublemaker teenagers, constraining Arthur to pursue them into a back street. They crush the sign against his face and continue to kick him while he's down brutally. In this time, Gotham is battling with wrongdoing, joblessness, and neediness. Arthur visits a social specialist for his medicine, as well as his continuous psychological well-being issues. On the transport ride home, a little kid checks Arthur out. He causes senseless faces that to entertain the kid, however his mom advises Arthur to let him be. Arthur starts to snicker madly and wildly. At the point when the mother questions him, he gives her a card that makes sense of that he has a state of mind that makes him snicker the way that he does. Arthur gets back to a skyscraper loft project, where he resides with his debilitated mother, Penny Frances Conroy. After supper, they sit and watch a television syndicated program with Hugh Murray Franklin, Robert De Niro. Arthur envisions himself being on the show and certainly standing out enough to be noticed. In his dream, Arthur charms the crowd and Murray by letting them know that he deals with his mom. Murray connects with Arthur and welcomes him up in front of an audience before everybody, where they share a familial hug. It is uncovered that Penny used to work for Thomas Wayne, Brett Cullen, and is fixated on the tycoon and has been at present composition to him to attempt to better their day-to-day environment. At Haas, Arthur is given a weapon for insurance by his colleague Randall Glenn Fleshler after he catches wind of the robbing episode. Arthur is both hesitant and eased to get such a gift as guns are banned working, however before long finds his certainty becoming subsequent to getting the weapon. In any case, not long after this, he is defied by his cold and cruel chief, who reproves him for losing the sign and removes the expense of it from his compensation. Arthur answers exclusively by grinning harshly. Arthur meets and becomes charmed by one of his neighbors, a single parent named Sophie Drummond, Zazie Beetz. She addresses him amiably about relating issues that he can connect with. Be that as it may, while attempting to establish a connection with her, he seems off-kilter and strange around her. At a certain point, he goes through his day following her. Afterward, she stops by his condo and inquires as to whether he was following her, and he concedes that he was, yet she doesn't appear to be put not entirely okay by it. He welcomes her to a stand-up parody show that he is performing at. She is reluctant, however is prevailed upon by his appeal and funny bone. Arthur watches entertainers perform to assist him with acquiring some understanding into the art, yet feels more abnormal and awkward as his beyond ridiculous giggling isn't certifiable. Arthur goes to the parody club for his exhibition. His anxiety consumes him and, as a survival technique, inadvertently winds up chuckling so hard that he can scarcely talk. He then, at that point, starts heading out into his daily schedule, which is actually a major buzzkill very. Sophie seems, by all accounts, to be in the crowd. The main individual who is chuckling at Arthur's jokes. This gives him the solace he wants to keep on kidding regardless of his inward torture and disturbance. Arthur later goes to a kids' clinic to engage them as a comedian. He carried his weapon with him, and it drops out on the floor. Arthur's manager later berated him for this. Arthur argues briefly possibility, however his supervisor denies and flames him on the spot. To finish things off, Randall blames everything on Arthur by asserting that Arthur got the weapon himself. On the metro train ride home from Haas in full jokester getup, Arthur spots three alcoholic youthful money road types working for vain endeavors bugging a lady. Arthur begins giggling unexpectedly and draws the consideration of the men, while the lady astutely escapes from that vehicle. The men approach Arthur and counterfeit him and his chuckling before they begin to beat him. Arthur retaliates justifiably, however they group up, and steadily beat him to the floor. Having had enough, Arthur then, at that point, takes out his weapon and shoots two of them dead justifiably prior to following the last person out of the train and killing him on the steps. In shock over what he recently did, Arthur withdraws into a close-by open men's room. After a snapshot of mad examination, he finds a power ascending inside him, and he starts to move without anyone else. Right now, he considers himself in the messy mirror to be a battered and spread but strong comedian and starts to embrace it. He conceals the firearm and afterward gets back to the high rise where he meets and kisses Sophie interestingly. The fresh insight about the three homicides spreads, with some considering it to be an assault on the rich, while others support the demonstration. Thomas Wayne stands up and denounces it, marking the lower class as jokesters, which turns into an image they promptly embrace. The following day, Arthur clears out his storage at Haas, yet not prior to facing Randall about double-crossing him and breaking the time-punching machine. He then leaves, feeling cheerful and free. News reports show jokester agitators fighting through the city and unleashing inconvenience, denouncing the higher special. Arthur sees that he has accidentally made this and starts to see his actual potential, which makes him really pleased. Arthur later finds one of Penny's letters to Thomas, which shows that Arthur is Thomas' child. Arthur goes to Wayne House, where he meets youthful Bruce Wayne, Dante Pereira Olsen. In the wake of playing out an enchanted stunt for Bruce, he sticks his hands through the entryway and powers Bruce to grin, acknowledging profound insight that they might be siblings. In any case, Alfred Douglas Hodge comes to mediate and advise Arthur to leave. Arthur makes reference to his mom and her association with Thomas. Alfred says he recollects Penny, yet that she was misleading him. Arthur assaults and almost chokes Alfred through the bars, however at that point sees that Bruce is watching. Arthur then gets hold of himself and escapes the Wayne premises. That night, Arthur tracks down Thomas at a public workmanship theater occasion. Arthur invades the theater by imitating an attendant. He follows Thomas Wayne into a men's room and attempts to defy him with the capability of him being his dad. Arthur specifies Penny, whom Thomas likewise recollects. While Thomas additionally recognizes that Penny used to work for him as a component of his housekeeping staff, he says that she was whimsical and that it's basically impossible that Arthur could be his child. Thomas likewise makes sense of that Penny never let Arthur know that he was embraced, which Arthur firmly dismisses before wildly chuckling in front of Thomas. Thomas, uninformed about Arthur's condition, becomes cautious and smacks Arthur upside the head prior to having him tossed out of the structure. Arthur gets back, where he torments himself by pummeling his head on the cooler in an attack of sorrow and yearning. The following day, two police analysts, Burke, Shea Wyam, and Garrity, Bill Camp, go to Arthur's loft to address him on the Metro murders because of the word that the suspect was wearing jokester makeup, and they realize Arthur lost his employment before that day. Arthur denies any association and gets the investigators to leave. Not long later, Penny becomes sick and is hospitalized. Sophie sits by Arthur as he keeps an eye on his mom. In the emergency clinic, Arthur sees that Murray's network program is playing a class from his stand-up daily practice, however he is harmed to see that Murray just played it to taunt Arthur. Arthur later gets a call from a representative for Murray's show. He is welcome to show up as a visitor, which Arthur hesitantly acknowledges. In the wake of concentrating on different meetings on the satire show, Arthur chooses to end it all before the live crowd, figuring it will make them snicker. Looking for hard confirmation, Arthur goes to Arkham Refuge and addresses a representative, named Carl Brian Tyree Henry, who has a record on Penny. At the point when Carl says he can't give Arthur the data he needs, Arthur grabs the record and rushes to understand it. When away and secret in a flight of stairs, Arthur opens the records and understands them, observing that Thomas was coming clean. As per the reports, actually Penny embraced Arthur after he was tracked down deserted as a child, and she manhandled him, binds him to a radiator and beating him close by her oppressive sweetheart. One piece of the record specifies Arthur having a head injury, which doubtlessly caused his chuckling condition. Arthur gets back to the clinic and lets Penny know that he thought his life was a misfortune, however he sees it's a fucking parody. With that, he covers Penny to death. Arthur returns home and breaks into Sophie's condo. She sees him and is unnerved, requesting that he leave for her little girl. Arthur inquires as to whether she has at any point had a genuinely horrendous day, to which she answers that she doesn't actually have any acquaintance with him. Through this, it is uncovered that each and every other second highlighting Sophie was simply in Arthur's mind. Erect and baffled, Arthur apologizes for his interruption and lets Sophie be, stomping out of her condo. Arthur begins to prepare for his appearance on Murray's show and paints his face white. He is visited in his loft by Randall and another previous collaborator, a diminutive person named Gary Lee Gill. They give sympathies after they catch wind of Penny's passing. However, at that point Randall starts referencing Burke and Garrity going to their condos to interrogate them concerning the tram murders. Arthur understands that Randall is just looking for a method for involving Arthur to cover his own butt and afterward snaps, fiercely wounding Randall 2 times in the face prior to crushing his head against the wall. An unnerved Gary questions Arthur's deeds and asks to be given up. Arthur consents to before energetically terrifying him as a trick. Gary attempts to fix the lock on Arthur's entryway yet can't because of his level. He requests that Arthur open the entryway for him, to which Arthur promptly concurs, stopping once to say thanks to Gary for being the main individual in his life who was pleasant to him. Arthur kisses Gary on the temple and lets him go. Arthur then, at that point, colors his hair green, puts on full jokester makeup, and wears a burgundy suit. He then moves down the flights of stairs, completely embracing his madness and light-hearted life. Burke and Garrity find Arthur moving in the road and move in to capture him. Arthur runs, and they pursue him into the tram train where many other Gotham residents are dressed like comedians subsequent to being propelled by the killings. Arthur conceals his face with a jokester cover, which he takes from a dissident, and coincidentally begins a fight in the train vehicles. As the analysts seek after Arthur, one comedian disrupts the general flow, and Burke incidentally shoots him dead when they battle with his firearm. The comedians haul the analysts out of the tram and begin beating them tirelessly, permitting Arthur to move away, moving flawlessly through the police powers which swarm the region. At the channel, Arthur meets Murray and his representative quality, Mark Maron. Before he goes on, Arthur requests that Murray present him as Joker, since Murray alluded to him as such while playing his clasp. Murray inquires as to whether his jokester makeup has political plans behind it, to which Arthur answers, "I don't have faith in that. I don't put stock in anything." While at the same time ready to be presented, Arthur sees Murray broadcasting a clasp of a striving Arthur attempting to make a wisecrack. This makes Arthur's psyche and plans change, and afterward he moves out into the spotlight. Arthur goes out as the show starts. He ungracefully makes Murray a wisecrack, which he tracks down, interesting for its potentially offensive sense of humor, however no other person does. In the wake of being defied with this, Arthur go on by confessing to the tram murders. Murray and the crowd gradually understand that Arthur is significant. Arthur contends that the crowd just focuses on the casualties since Thomas Wayne represented them, however any other person like Arthur would be disregarded and strolled over. Murray and the crowd become angrier with Arthur, however he does as well. Murray chides Arthur, which grows into Arthur snapping and making another quip, smiling happily. "What do you get when you cross an insane maverick with a general public that leaves him and deals with him like rubbish?" he asks, just for Murray to have a go at stopping him prior to require. In the interim, Arthur has been captured and is being taken by the police. Arthur peers through the window and chuckles merrily as he sees the annihilation and confusion he has caused. All at once, the jokesters in a rescue vehicle run into the vehicle, killing the police and liberating Arthur, who was harmed and oblivious. At the point when he gets up, Arthur winds up encompassed by a horde of cheering mobsters in jokester covers. The agitators then cheer Arthur on as he remains on a vehicle and embraces their deference, since he has gained the appreciation he has long wanted. He moves to their cheering and afterward stops, observing that his nose is draining lavishly. He then spreads the blood across his upper lip and smiles prior to remaining before them, raised like a divine being. In a little while, Arthur is secured in Arkham Shelter. He giggles in the wake of recounting this story and pictures a youthful Bruce remaining over his folks in the rear entryway. Understanding that he has, as it were, transformed Bruce into himself, Arthur chuckles some more, finding this truly silly. He meets another social laborer, April Elegance, and says he needs to make her a quip, yet she wouldn't get it. A couple of moments later, Arthur then gets out of the room, abandoning a path of horrendous impressions before he is pursued around by orderlies. Thank you for staying with us. For more such content, please subscribe to our channel.